Okay, thanks, Doug. What I wanted to concentrate on is to elaborate on some of the issues that came up from the prior panel in terms of fitting the audit into perspective of the big picture. And what is the big picture is that our job is to make sure that we're counting the votes accurately and in a transparent way that the public can have confidence in that count. And this has been an issue since the founding of our republic. This cartoon with Senator Tweed ran in 1874 when the big complaints then were that they needed better voter registration procedures and to adopt the Australian ballot, and that this would be the solutions to all fraud. And Tweed just laughed because he said it's counting the votes that really matters. And indeed, his quote is often attributed to Stalin, who repeated it many times, and people didn't realize it actually came from Tweed. I think it's worthwhile to look at some of the fundamental problems. If you're really going to take the process seriously, you have to realize that there are two basic issues that come up when you conduct audits. One is that there's fraud, or the potential for fraud. And the second is that there are mistakes, and there are certainly far more mistakes than there are examples of proven fraud. And the big problem comes is that if you don't pay attention to mistakes on a regular basis, then you've always got the problem, was it done accidentally on purpose? And so it's always worthwhile to look back at some of the routine issues that come up in fraud. To me, in the auditing process, the most important issue is the security of the ballot. And I can't help but to illustrate it with the famous election between Johnson and Stevenson in 1948, where LBJ, learning from his first race against Stevenson for governor 6 years earlier, where he feels Stevenson had stolen the race from him, learned better that it was necessary to hold back the ballots and not report the results and turn in your final ballots until you absolutely needed to do. This photograph, which came out after the fact, is of the Texas Ranger, who is on the far left, three Johnson campaign workers, actually two Johnson campaign workers, and the person who's second from the right is the father of Johnson's campaign manager for South Texas, Jack Parr from Duval County. And this is the famous Box 13 from Gin Wells County, in which 203 ballots appeared 2 weeks after the election, and 201 of them were cast for Johnson and changed a 57-vote margin for Stevenson into a 140-vote defeat, and got Johnson elected to the U.S. Senate and started his career down the path. It's an issue that comes up all the time. In New York, we call these mushroom ballots, ballots that grow out of cold, dark places and suddenly appear overnight. But as Dean alluded to, that was a major issue in the Washington State recount 2 years ago, in which several thousand ballots also seem to have appeared out of nowhere in King County. And so what I stress is that almost as important as getting the audits done is having security procedures in place and that people pay attention to these procedures. The first security protocol is to account for all of the ballots used or not. New York has a rule that with its paper ballots that every ballot printed has a number on it, and those stubs all have to be accounted for at the end of the day. That does add some expense to the cost of printing the ballots. If we're talking numbers, it probably adds 10 or 15 cents a ballot to do it that way. But it's an important accounting method in order to make certain that ballots are accounted for. And then one can't ignore the chain of custody, that the ballots have to get from whether it be ballots or the voter verifiable paper audit trail records, they have to get from the poll site to the counting site where they're going to be audited. And I always like to liken it to the banking industry, that we should treat every ballot as if it were a $100 bill, and that there has to be careful chain of custody every time those ballots are handed off, whether it be from the inspectors at the polling place to the police who then deliver them to the borough office, and then to everybody who handles ballots at the Board of Elections, that there has to be a record of who handled them so that at any given time you should know who is responsible for the ballots. Bipartisan control over those ballots is also, to me, an important concept. New York, like Ohio, is a state that mandates bipartisan control at every step in the process. And but remarkably, when I first became a commissioner, I found that the ballots, inevitably, one person would have the key to the ballots. And they thought I was silly when I said that there should be a Democratic key and a Republican key, and that everything should be locked under bipartisan control when they're left out of sight. And then, of course, whenever ballots are missing, we've got to go find them. And it's important to sanction breaches, that even though there may be innocent mistakes, there should be appropriate consequences for the election workers. And it may just be a reprimand or an admonishment, but if you tolerate constant mistakes, then you're never going to know what's accidentally on purpose or not. The butterfly ballot is a great example. I point out it was a Democratic commissioner who did it. And then finally, we should anticipate problems in advance. We already talked about the need to spell out the rules for counting the ballots. And one of the things that I would recommend is that people actually draw up examples of all the different ways that ballots can be mismarked. Virginia actually put them in their rules, and I give them credit as the example that we follow. And working out in advance exactly what each permutation will produce will be an effective way of speeding the audit process.